So I'm AJ Jager, Executive Director of the Belk Center for Community College Leadership and Research, and I'm excited to be with you all today. And what I'll do is set the stage for the webinar, but before I want to share just a bit about the Belk Center. At the Belk Center, we distill knowledge into actionable insights, create meaningful opportunities for collaboration, and equip leaders to tackle pressing issues in higher education. And we do that around three areas: leadership and learning, research and insights, and partnerships and innovation. And one partnership is with the North Carolina Student Success Center and AATD, and that is the work that we've done to launch the 4 teaching and learning hubs across the state: East, West, Central, and Piedmont, over the course of the past 2 years, to engage all of our 58 community colleges in complementing individual colleges' teaching and learning efforts to scale and sustain professional learning for faculty and staff. And since we've launched in 2001, the hubs have worked with campus networks to offer both face-to-face and virtual workshops and seminars to help test, adopt, and scale evidence-based strategies that increase student success outcomes. This webinar today is the first of a series designed by my colleagues, Dr. Monique Klokloff and Dr. Shantell Strickland. In this webinar, we're going to share some guiding principles for building a culture of teaching and learning, along with some best practices for driving innovation around student-centered teaching. And I am fortunate to have my great partner, Shantell, on this call. So I am going to turn it over to you, and I'll say it correctly, Shantell. Great to have you on the call, and turn it to you.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. We're really excited about this webinar, really excited about the discussions and sharing about building a culture of teaching and learning. And we have 2 really great examples of what that might look like here in North Carolina. So before we get started, I'd like to just do some introductions to our guest speakers today. First, we have Dr. Yolanda Wilson, who has over 22 years of experience in progressive leadership roles, beginning her career as an adjunct faculty member and now serving as the Vice President for Instruction at Ashe County and Allegheny Center at Wilkes Community College in Wilkesboro, North Carolina. She is a leadership coach for Achieving the Dream and an adjunct faculty member in the EDD program at NC State. Dr. Wilson understands that using data to improve student success is not just a process, it's not a destination, and she believes in creating safe spaces for faculty and staff to discuss data and develop strategic plans to create more equitable outcomes. So we are so fortunate that you're here with us today, Dr. Wilson. Thank you for your time in advance. We also have Dr. Andrea Jackson, who is the coordinator of the Center for Faculty Development at Fayetteville Tech Community College, located in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Dr. Jackson's educational career spans also over 22 years, to include instruction at the K-12 level, as well as serving in the adjunct faculty capacity. Her instructional background, coupled with extensive coaching and leadership experience, has truly laid a foundation for the work being done in the center at Fayetteville Tech for both faculty and staff at the college. Dr. Jackson is really excited to be a part of a campus focused on building relationships through a system of collaborative support to ultimately ensure the success of Fayetteville Tech students. So thank you for your time today, Dr. Jackson. We appreciate you being here. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and jump right into the questions. Ladies, are you ready to go? Okay. So in regards to, looking at data and understanding data, especially as it relates to building the culture of teaching and learning, and looking, holistically at your practices for change management and strategic planning, which has to be a part of all this. What is the impact you have had on the culture shift at your college? And can you talk a little bit about how others have embraced this change and this emphasis and focus on teaching and learning and the culture of that? Dr. Jackson, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shantell, and thank you so much for this invitation. I am really excited to be here with you all this afternoon. Regarding this first question, this was a very impactful question that gave me a lot of pause and a lot of opportunity to think and reflect on what we're doing here at FTCC. On our campus, we are looking to shift from a traditional instructional delivery model to a transformational teaching and learning model, which is something that we were talking about specifically today. So reviewing the available data that we had, it mandated that we look at our overall course alignment on our campus. We knew that tackling this initiative was going to require a big culture change at FTCC. And so we wanted to focus on course alignment to assist our faculty to understand and to see the correlation of how utilizing clear, concise, measurable learning objectives would enhance their success in student outcomes. So we've looked at this change. It's been a bit of a climb, I will admit that. But what we're looking to do is move at a progressing pace that's going to help our campus and it's going to make sense where we're at our own institution. So trying to answer that question like overall and really kind of coming from the standpoint of our center, the actual development of our center is a big move in this direction. It is a big effort, a big stride in the way of support and how we're moving on our campus. So we actually have a center that's been developed. There are funds that have been allocated to carry out activities that we are doing to support the teaching and learning process. And that has been a big part of the change process. That move in itself has shown our faculty, it's shown that we are indeed about this particular change and moving towards a more transformational teaching and learning model. So I kind of want to yield a little bit to Dr. Wilson at that point to see where else you're coming from as far as that culture shift.
I'll be happy to. Thank you so much, Andrea. And thank you, AJ and Shantell, and for those on the call. I appreciate the opportunity to share. So as we know, I remember Karen Stout coming to a Dallas Herring lecture some years ago and kind of painting this analogy as she shared. Karen Stout, as you know, is the CEO of Achieving the Dream, and she shared that we've done a lot of work around kind of student support services, holistic supports, helping students outside of the classroom, wraparound services, et cetera, but not as much work in the teaching and learning space. And she kind of challenged us. It was a little bit of a call to action where she shared, and I think rightfully so, that true kind of transformation occurs in the classroom. It occurs in the learning spaces for students. It's kind of where the rubber meets the road. And so if we really want to improve the outcomes at our institutions, improve equity outcomes, improve completion outcomes, transfer outcomes, retention outcomes, then we have to be willing to think through how do we support and engage our faculty in a way that increases kind of the completion and retention of our students. And so I know that that was one of the things that spurred conversations around the development of the teaching and learning hubs, of which Wilkes Community College is a part. But I think it also, for me as a leader sitting in the room that day, also caused me to reflect as a faculty member who started as a part-time faculty member and has done kind of traditional roles in the academic side of the house, and then later in student services. How might I think through collectively with my faculty leaders, how to make an impact on our outcomes with course success and completion? That's not easy. And it's not an easy thing to navigate, thinking through how do you make that difference and how do you support your faculty and encourage them to make that difference. And so at Wilkes Community College, we've done a few things, and it started really with the president. So I'm glad to see that there's a president on the call. Dr. Spriggs, was so delighted to see her with us today, and others who may listen to it at some point as well, the recording. But the presidential support is key. And I have to give a huge shout out and kudos to our own president here at Wilkes Community College, Dr. Jeff Cox, who has a background in curriculum and instruction. He worked in K-12, he was a superintendent, He was an associate superintendent of curriculum instruction within a school system. So he understood the importance of teaching and learning in a way that I think really helped support the strategic direction at our institution with supporting faculty in this end. That's an important piece because I do believe that it can be more challenging to shift culture if you don't have support at the top. You also need support throughout the organization, right? Because the president can't do it by him or herself alone. Okay, they can have the vision for it, they can see the importance of it, but it really has to kind of infiltrate the organization so that at every level, folks understand the importance of it and prioritize it. So one of the things that we did is we have a phenomenal strategic plan that was developed, I guess now about 5 years ago. And I noticed in our strategic plan that we really didn't have a component of the plan that focused solely on teaching and learning. And I went to Dr. Cox about it. And at the time, the person who was kind of leading our strategic planning efforts and said, I believe this is something that we need to elevate to our strategic plan. And is it possible to add it, even though the strategic plan has been in motion for a few years? And they absolutely agreed with that and were supportive of that. And so I think one of the first things you have to do, in addition to having that presidential support, is making sure that it's embedded within your strategic planning process. And when we look at strategic plans, sometimes we see teaching and learning in there, and sometimes we don't. And so if we truly want to prioritize teaching and learning and the focus of that, whether it's professional learning for faculty, both full and part-time, whether it's looking at data, et cetera, it needs to be reflected in your plan because your plan reflects your priorities. And what you kind of prioritize is typically what you fund and what you put resources around. And so kind of my next point, in addition to adding it to our strategic plan to help shift the culture, was we recognize that many of our faculty are 9-month faculty. And so you hear the very, I think, understandable notion from faculty is that we don't have time to look at data. We don't have time to do all this professional development. You know, many of our faculty may be teaching overloads, or we have faculty who are doing clinicals and labs. So it becomes increasingly difficult to build in the time to prioritize just moments to be able to sit down and think through with your colleagues ways to improve my teaching and learning practice. And so one of the other efforts that we did to support our faculty in that regard is to add 5 days to our 9-month contracts. So again, with Dr. Cox's support, we were able to add the 5 days to 9-month contracts, and those became dedicated days for professional learning regarding teaching and learning practice. That was also the way that we were able to launch our first annual Teaching and Learning Summit. It was 2 days in May. After graduation, and the first day, and I'll go into more details about this, was focusing solely on teaching and learning. The second day was focusing on data and looking at data collectively in your departments and thinking through kind of strategic direction and planning for the next year and focus areas in your departments, looking at your core success data. Okay, and so those 5 additional days have become really critically important to being able to advance our agenda around teaching and learning. So I talked a little bit about kind of having presidential support, embedding in your strategic plan, and then of course, allocating resources appropriately and strategically to support that effort, not only with our 9-month faculty contracts, but we also devoted resources around professional learning at our institution. One of the ways that showed up is in our partnering with Achieving the Dream. So we are not an Achieving the Dream institution, even though I'm an Achieving the Dream coach. Achieving the Dream was sharing with institutions that they could customize workshops. And so what we did was we contracted with them to customize some workshops for us around utilizing data. And they worked very closely with us. They are so phenomenal. They worked very closely with us to think through what our specific needs are in our institutional culture and what we needed to kind of fashion around those workshops, beginning with socializing data at the top of the organization, our executive cabinet, making sure that there was workshops customized for them where they were comfortable with our Power BI dashboards and comfortable with utilizing those dashboards and looking at metrics that we believed indicated kind of where students were on the pathway and what the hiccups were for students, and looking kind of with our guided pathways framework from entry to exit, and what metrics along the way that we needed to pay attention to. So we did that with our senior management first, and then we had a workshop with our academic deans and middle managers. Okay, because we knew that they couldn't help support faculty in utilizing data to move the culture in teaching and learning if they weren't comfortable doing it themselves. So we needed to create safe spaces to have these conversations. And we started doing so by socializing data at each level of the organization, eventually culminating into kind of these data workshops designed for our department chairs, okay, and our key academic leaders. That gave them an opportunity to begin to look at our Power BI dashboard and think through the data and ask questions and feel like they were empowered and equipped to be able to lead and facilitate those conversations with their own faculty, both full and part-time. So those were just some of the things that we did to kind of socialize data throughout the organization. Again, partnering with Achieving the Dream, customizing that for us, and then ultimately having a workshop where we asked Achieving the Dream to help us launch our own teaching and learning fellowship program. And I can go into that more later, but I just wanted to talk about how we began to shift culture. And we talked about teaching and learning every chance we could. We talked about it at employee gatherings. We talked about the importance of teaching and learning in our academic dean meetings and our academic and student services council meetings. We talked about it, we engaged faculty senate around it, and that this was going to be a prioritization for the institution, and we wanted their support and their engagement to help us think it through. We really saw this as an opportunity to have kind of a mutual conversation and discussion with all key stakeholders and asking, what are we doing well? What do we need to focus on? So that it didn't appear that it was a top-down initiative, but that it was a mutually beneficial shared governance, participatory governance opportunity for us to think this through together, all with the goals of how do we help students get across that finish line. We know our faculty are amazing and doing really, really great work, but what tools do we need to give our faculty to be more successful? What does that look like for them? And how do we make sure that they are equipped and supported to do the very important work that they do online and in the classroom?
Thank you so much for that, for both of you. Really great work that's happening at your institutions. Just as a follow-up, we know that to create a culture of teaching and learning, we really need to engage, as you alluded to, Dr. Wilson, all educators from regardless of what seat they sit in. It's not just the faculty, it's all educators. So interested if you, both of you would be willing to share how you specifically reached your staff, leaders, administrators, folks that are not necessarily in the classroom teaching every day, how you engaged with them to either begin creating or, sustaining what you've established so far.
I could, okay, thank you. So, Dr. Wilson, there were so many points that you brought up that I just wanted to oh my goodness, that's awesome. I don't, so I'm glad I did not interrupt. But I saw that, again, we're coming from, two different sides of the coin here. And having the Center for Faculty Development, I definitely see where we're a little bit more so one-on-one with our faculty. We have to definitely come from that top down. But a lot of our connection is actually one-on-one with our faculty. And so I just kind of wanted to add to a couple of the points that you made is that we noticed for us here at FTCC that hiring additional staff, for instance, in the Center for Faculty Development, allowed us an opportunity to have more contact and have more one-to-one contact with our faculty, in addition to getting in touch with the leaders. That training that we have mentioned, Dr. Strickland has mentioned that as well. getting that training from the top down and then making sure that the message that was sent from the top down is the same thing that we were saying when we're speaking to a faculty member, because we all know that sometimes the message gets a little watered down. Sometimes it might even get a little skewed. But as you say, Dr. Wilson, you mentioned how often the teaching and learning and those tenets were brought up and in different different platforms, different environments. And so that is something that we found works very well, is to make sure that the message is clear and that the message is consistent and that the message is heard often. The hiring of additional staff, developing policies so that there are procedures to follow and things that people can fall back on, information that people can refer to in the absence of, that voice in their ear. Mentioning the top-down training, that has definitely been something that has worked very well for us. We have the support of our campus president, of our campus VP, AVP in charge of curriculum, our deans. Everyone is really on board as to what it is we're trying to achieve. And so having that top-down support really helps to ensure that the faculty are getting the same message as often as they are hearing it. And then having that coaching, having that those collaborative moments, those roundtables, having those opportunities to provide professional development or training. And again, the message is being brought in the same way every time. And so we see that we're change agents in the center. We are literally change agents because we are working with our faculty in small groups. We're working with them individually, and we're working with them by departments. We're working with them campus wide. Again, making sure that that same information is going out over and over again. And through all of this, we're being respectful of the dynamics of our organization, of the culture that we know that we have at this point in time, and moving in that particular, continuum, making sure that we are not moving too fast, but that we are persistent so that those who are maybe a little hesitant or unsure or unfamiliar with the information that is being brought out, that they have an opportunity, and there are plenty of opportunities for them to familiarize themselves with what it is we're trying to accomplish, why we're trying to accomplish it, and definite modeling and examples of what it is we're trying to reach.
So to build upon the excellent feedback that Dr. Jackson just shared, and to scaffold a little bit about what I was sharing earlier, that it has to be embedded within your strategic priorities. There has to be funding allocated and resources allocated. It has to be messaged from the top and throughout the organization frequently and often. And there has to be opportunities for different levels of the organization to be able to give feedback and input, like engaging your faculty senate, et cetera. The other piece I would share as we're thinking through kind of how do you build that culture and some specific techniques. Time is always a big element that you hear from faculty, is that we don't have the time. And so already in our academic calendar at Wilkes Community College, we had 2 professional development days already established. We had one in the beginning of the fall, full day, one in the beginning of the spring semester, full day. Okay. And so we always have kind of, and faculty and staff development falls underneath my purview. And I have a director of faculty and staff development. So I begin to think strategically about who that keynote speaker was going to be at each fall and spring professional development day. Okay. And really asking that person to have a bit of a teaching and learning focus. They may talk about other things, but wanted them to kind of embed that within their talk. And we actually developed something that was similar to the Dallas Herring lecture. We'd have a speaker, and then we'd have a panel discussion afterwards of key community college leaders responding to the speaker. And we wanted to make sure that we had faculty and staff on the panel. And so we had, different speakers like Dr. Greg Williams from Odessa, talking about the tremendous work that they had done around teaching and learning, accelerated terms, et cetera. We had, and we asked them to use data in their presentation. We had Russell Lowry Hart, who's known for his culture of caring. But in addition to that, at Amarillo, they've done some really tremendous work around moving the needle on student success and teaching and learning as well. So we asked him to talk about how he had created this transformative culture around care that then led to significant work in his teaching and learning space. We had Flowers Darby, who is affiliated with ACUE. And she really talked about online instruction and how you engage students in the online form. So those are just a few examples. We had Josh Weiner come from Aspen and talk about, again, the importance of teaching and learning and how that's one of the pillars in the Aspen framework. And so we just try to strategically think through and leverage key kind of leaders in this teaching and learning space and in this work. And then had our faculty and staff kind of respond to that through the panel. And then we'd have subsequent sessions and PD sessions related to it throughout the day. Okay. And so those 2 days were already in place, but we began to strategically think about what topics we covered during those days to, again, reinforce the message. When we added those additional days to the contract, it also gave us an opportunity to add some days at the end of the 9-month faculty contract, of course, and then we could dedicate some time within the contract for professional development, so faculty had time built into the academic calendar. So in order to do that, you've got to plan. I'm over the calendar committee, so you've got to plan that out. I mean, you've got to build those days in prior to that calendar being posted, right? And so we had to think through what days make the most sense. So we'd have a touch point, since we had the fall PD day at the beginning of fall, we'd have in the middle of fall, kind of a PD, dedicated PD day for faculty. We had the day, of course, beginning of spring, then in the middle of spring, we'd have a dedicated PD day. And then we have the 2 days at the end of the calendar, which is our teaching and learning and data summit. Okay, so you've got to plan for this work kind of strategically in a way that makes the most sense. So we also did that. We wanted to make sure too that we didn't leave our part-time faculty behind. They are such a critical part of our teaching and learning and work, and we have such a large percentage of our courses taught by adjunct faculty, and I started as an adjunct faculty, so I have a bit of sensitivity around that. We made sure that all of our PD was offered virtually and that it was recorded and that they would have an opportunity to participate even in our teaching and learning fellowship program if they so chose. So we even had a professional learning community that was just designed for adjunct faculty with flexibility built in. So if they wanted to opt into that and meet in these communities of practice is what that wound up being. That's kind of the foundation of our teaching and learning fellowship program. They had an opportunity to do so. And we had a lot of faculty who did that. Now, when you think about kind of a specific strategy or technique that we utilized, it was, I would say, the launch of our teaching and learning fellowship program. Okay. And that was a creation of interdisciplinary teams of faculty. Okay, part-time faculty, optional, full-time faculty required, where we were able to leverage a project we had done in our quality enhancement plan. So when you could leverage existing work to take it at scale, then I would encourage you to do that. So it doesn't feel so new for faculty, right? So we leveraged an online instruction program that we had and said, now we're going to take this at scale in this new teaching and learning fellowship program, and we're going to ask all of our faculty to be a part. And we created interdisciplinary teams on purpose with gen ed faculty and technical faculty on these teams together. I like to say you don't want a team larger than you can fit comfortably in a minivan, right? So we didn't have anybody more than 10 or 12, okay? And they would meet periodically to talk about strategies. So what was the curriculum? So thinking through leveraging what we have, well, our awesome North Carolina Student Success Center had created, I think Susan Barbados was here at the time, these modules. Some of you may receive hearing about them. There was these teaching and learning modules that they asked faculty from across the state to develop. The modules were on growth mindset, backward design, universal design for learning, etc. Okay. We asked permission from the North Carolina Student Success Center, can we use these existing modules? That became the basis of our curriculum for our professional learning communities. They told us yes. They gave us permission to use it. Their IT department gave us access. So we built those, we put those modules in a Moodle shell so it appeared like it was one course for our teaching and learning fellowship program. And then we asked our faculty champions. So we identified faculty champions based on those faculty who had been particularly successful in that QEP project I mentioned around online instruction. They had emerged kind of as really strong faculty leaders, had done really good work around teaching and learning, and had shown some improvement in their teaching and learning success. We wanted it to be by faculty and for faculty. So we identified faculty champions across the institution that would be willing to lead these new professional learning communities. Those faculty champions, we asked to look at those modules that the North Carolina Student Success Center had provided, customize it for our own faculty, and lead those interdisciplinary teams, those professional learning communities throughout the year, where faculty worked on it almost like a flipped classroom, worked on the modules on their own, met once every 3 or 4 weeks to discuss, and talked about how they were implementing those strategies that they learned from the modules in their classrooms. In the Teaching and Learning Summit that we did then, we asked for each one of those professional learning communities to present what they had learned, those teams, and their ahas and takeaways, and what was the improvements that they had seen based on implementation of some of those strategies from those modules. So it was too big of a project to start it from scratch. We had to think through where we could leverage existing resources and try to plug it into a model that would work for our faculty. At the end of that Teaching and Learning Summit, we gave them a QR code to say, give us feedback on how the fellowship program worked for you. They gave us feedback in real time. We were able to then take that feedback from all of our faculty, customize and train, change and tweak and modify our Teaching and Learning Fellowship for year 2. So they felt like they were heard, that there was buy-in, that there was engagement, opportunity to kind of help fashion it in a way that worked for them. And now we're in year 2 of our Teaching and Learning Fellowship program. And we have other topics that we're exploring, and we've identified more faculty champions to lead those particular PLCs. And so it's going well so far.
That is great. That is great information. And I really do believe that we are peeking in each other's windows, Dr. Wilson. But it's a good feeling. It's a good feeling to chat with other professionals and see that, you know, some of the work that you're doing on your campus actually mimics what's going on other places, and that there are successes to be held, you know, across the board. I really love the idea of the leveraging what's already been done. We don't have to recreate the wheel. Sometimes, you know, accessing that information may not be the easiest, but, you know, we network for reasons. We have these conversations for reasons, because we can all learn from what we've all, you know, been through in the past. So I do appreciate that. We do something similar to that very thing here at Fayetteville Tech in our Center for Faculty Development. We have a teaching foundations course that is very similar to what you just described, where we are asking our faculty to partake in a course that is self-paced. It is steeped in best practices, research-based information, and then they use that information with their own content, and they start creating content for future use. So those are some of the things that, again, we have utilized and have had really, really good success. In addition to what you just mentioned, I thought, wow, the PD days, we're actually doing exactly that, and we are utilizing those days, I think, in a very productive manner, so that faculty are not feeling overwhelmed, and we are offering them an opportunity to have access to these trainings or this PD at a time when they would normally, you know, be doing something else. But this is something that would really alleviate some of that anxiety, because that is something that we have received feedback on, and we wanted to make sure that those days were utilized effectively. Also, the PLC communities that you mentioned, we feel like the way we utilize them has a very, it mimics, it looks very similar to what you're doing on your campus. And again, I think that just reinforces the fact that having those faculty-led PLCs, I think that really makes our faculty understand, and I think it makes them see that this is worthwhile. This is led by us. This is led by people who do the same thing that I do every day. It's not just a mandate from above. And I think that they are able then to see the worth. We talked a little earlier about our strategic plans and what they do or don't include. I think it's awesome that you were able to go in and make a few adjustments to your strategic plan to mirror what exactly is going on campus. And looking at our own strategic plan, of course, it includes assisting our students to earn degrees, be successful, continue in their education and career goals. And I think that something that we have focused on our campus, which is our faculty onboarding, I think that's an area that has made a significant contribution to how our faculty proceed. I think starting off with the end in mind and giving our new faculty an opportunity to see that of things to come, giving them an opportunity to take dip their toe in the water. As I say, we just give them a little snippet. We orient them to the campus. We orient them to teaching for those who may not have that strong teaching foundation. But we're setting the stage for a part that they're going to play in upcoming student success as well as campus culture. We feel that starting there and putting a lot of emphasis on those first few days or that orientation gives us a starting point for growth, and it starts to allow our faculty to begin to navigate the challenging organizational dynamics that they will encounter. You know, that's just the nature of the beast. And some of the other professional learning that we've done has been focused on high flex teaching, maybe focusing on rubrics, this course alignment that I mentioned, objective writing, technology integration. Some of those are areas that we felt were very instrumental in along with pedagogy and andragogy. These are ideas and strategies and areas that we feel are going to arm our faculty to be instructionally dangerous. They are going to, blaze a front for those to follow. Also, something I wanted to mention that we are doing to help prepare for our process of course alignment is we are asking our faculty to complete course maps. And these course maps are reviewed for alignment. That is a big project that we are in the throes of as we speak. And it is going really well. It is helping us to create what we're going to call master courses. And that is just yet another quality strategy that we're using to ensure that our courses are equitable across the board. So that is just something that I wanted to mention in addition to all the other things. We also are partnering with ACU, the Association of College and University Educators, providing those micro-credential courses for both faculty and staff. We hold roundtable discussions when those micro-credentials are complete to allow our faculty to share and collaborate on what they learn, what they're actually implementing in their classes. And we have seen some really great success with the data that we received back from those ACU courses, as well as the implementation numbers. They are just extremely high. So along with AQ, we've got QM that we are really supporting. We are a QM school now, and we are trying to get our faculty to not only become the rubric trained, but also encouraging them to become peer reviewers through QM, which is yet another level of certification. Our instructional coaching is something that we are really big on here. And I know you mentioned something about a caring environment earlier, Dr. Wilson, and that's something that we use in our center to build a rapport with our faculty. We really encourage, the safe environment to get that buy-in, developing that rapport with our faculty so that we can come back and introduce almost anything, because once we get that buy-in, we really do have the opportunity to set the stage for all the further learning that we would want, the further learning and development and collaboration that we want to see, on our campus. So those are just a few things I wanted to add there.
Thank you both. A question about professional learning for faculty and staff related to being data literate, related to being data stewards. Can you share with us any examples that you have put in front of your faculty and staff to help them to look at the numbers to be able to make decisions about the classroom, or if it's a staff member, what they're doing in their departments to support students?
So I would first say, that's such a great question. I would first say that we have to model it as leaders. Okay, and so we were intentional at Wilkes not to say, we want you to do this, but we're not showing that we're doing this. Okay, so we had established a data kind of analysis team that's consists of both academic and staff leaders on that team, and our data kind of information specialist helps facilitate that team, and he pulls data metrics from Power BI that may be of interest, and we have cross-functional teams representation on that particular committee, and we discuss it. We had training amongst key faculty and staff leaders that I mentioned earlier that really helped us hone in with Achieving the Dream, what key metrics we need to focus on. So I'll give you an example. One is the early momentum metrics, okay? And so you've seen articles around that with Community College Research Center. How are students performing in their first semester? How are those students doing after 30 credit hours, et cetera, et cetera? How many students aren't earning any credit hours at all? So you have credit hours attempted versus credit hours earned. How are they doing in key gateway courses? So we begin to develop a data language around key metrics that we felt was important for our institution to focus on, that we felt really gave us opportunities for further collaboration. So I'll give you an example. When we looked at some of our English and math success, we recognized that students who were doing optional tutoring were having much more success than students who were not, okay? And so we thought it was an opportunity then to expand our embedded tutoring model, okay, and work with our faculty to think that through. We gave them the data and said, what conclusions are you drawing? And what might we consider and think through? Let's look at these sections that have embedded tutors, these sections that do not. What direction do you think we need to go in? And they said, well, we'd like to take this at scale and look at some of our high-risk courses, et cetera. And so that gave them an opportunity to partner with our colleagues, our staff colleagues in the student services area to begin to think through how do we then take this to scale and how do we look at the data and monitor the impact. Okay, and so what we say is that data belongs to all of us. We want to be transparent about it. We want it to be authentic. And we know that we've got a lot of data sources out there. So it can be a little bit confusing and complex. You know, do I look at iPads? Do I look at our own system-wide dashboard, which is phenomenal? Do I look at our own internal local Power BI dashboard, whatever tool you use? You know, what am I looking at when I'm looking at data, and does all the data align when you're trying to look at it side by side? And so you've got to be able to have transparent conversations around it. And if you're building your own data dashboard, you've got to have trust in your own data, and you've got to make sure that others trust the data, because you'll start getting questions around your data. And so if you're not quite sure what you're pulling from to get your data, if you're not quite sure what those data metrics mean, if you don't know how to look at a cohort and follow that through, or look at trends over time, or think through that this data disaggregated reflects this population and this reflects this campus location, or this reflects that modality, then it could begin to get a little bit complex. And so you don't want conversations to begin to get derailed because people don't trust the numbers. So you got to make sure that you're building in that data trust. You also, as you're thinking through, you want to build in data capacity, because we have one person who's phenomenal, but he's our primary kind of person that helps crunch the numbers. We have a few other folk that help, but they have other responsibilities. And so how do we empower more people to be able to go into the Power BI dashboard that we provide and feel empowered and equipped to understand, filter, and look at their own data? So one of the things that we've begun to do is send out a weekly data dashboard infographic. Okay, and so that infographic has about 5 or 6 key data points that goes throughout the entire institution. Then folk can click on that different tabs in the infographic and drill down even deeper into our Power BI data. Well, we didn't start with that, we built to that. So we had to socialize data at all levels before we felt comfortable now sharing and giving to others this infographic. And so what we want them to do with that is take that infographic and then take that data that you see in real time, go back to your departments and begin to have conversations. What do you see? What do we need to do? What's going well? What may we need to address? And what actionable items can we take right now in real time to help make sure our students stay on track? So we show it and we present it as a tool, a safe space, a resource to begin to drive conversations around student equity, access, and success. And once people feel that it's a safe place and they can trust the data, then they begin to respond to the data and start thinking through in real time, what can we do to improve these outcomes?
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. That was really informative. And that makes me think, once again, that's coming from the center. we're just in a different position, but we do have constant contact with our deans to discuss their data and their needs based on what those numbers state, and how their analysis of the data can inform how we move forward with any future PDs or any other additional needs. So based on that input, we go in and we develop training that actually utilizes that data so that we can assist the faculty with their individual analysis, or how we can assist them with any training that they may need on a departmental level. Again, all based on those metrics. We really want our faculty to feel confident and comfortable, as you mentioned, that safe space, with reading and understanding their data so that they individually can adjust their instruction based on their numbers and not necessarily waiting on someone to tell them. We want to help train them on whatever the data may say. How do I read this? What does it mean? And what does that mean to my instruction? How should my instruction change as a result of what I'm seeing here? So those conversations, that ongoing conversation, that ongoing back and forth dialogue that we have with our deans, even our AVP of curriculum, that really helps us. And what we have seen is an uptick in requesting specific data. This allows those deans to ask for specific data, those department chairs to say, based on our data, we see that we need some assistance in this area. And so we step in and we provide assistance in that area. But now we are being very, intentional about what we're doing, why we're doing it. And we are very sure of our goal and why we're doing it. And so that has been a very helpful conversation that we keep the door open on, and we're going to definitely continue and hopefully improve upon as we move forward.
I'd also like to add, if I can, Shantell, I know we're going a little bit into the Q&A, that it's really important to think through not only where your data is stored, building data capacity, but who has access to what data throughout your organization. You've got to think through access. So we were very intentional about that. So for example, for your faculty, are you giving them access to all course success data across the organization, or their departmental success data only, or just their success data only, and not their colleagues in the same department? So you've got to begin, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just a matter of, you've got to be intentional about data access and who is given access to what and why, so that you really understand if they're given this level of access, the intention is and the purpose is to this end. So it's really clear as you're thinking through, you're building that data capacity throughout the organization.
Thank you. Very great points. Thank you both for sharing with us today. I want to open it up to our audience, either via the chat or we have a small enough group where you feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions that you might have, any points of clarity that you are seeking for our speakers, Dr. Jackson and Wilson, today, about how they have been able to create this culture of teaching and learning. Okay, well, if you're still thinking of your questions, Dr. Spriggs, I know you have a whole audience there, so for sure I thought you would have something to add to this. But I just want to really reiterate that this has been amazing to hear the great things that you're doing, and just to offer, the rest of our 56 colleges across the state that you all are available to, talk further about what you're doing at your institution, and that everyone has a starting place. And so this is just two great examples of how we really can start to build and sustain our culture of teaching and learning. Dr. Spriggs, did you want to speak?
Could I ask a question? We just had to think a minute before we knew exactly how to phrase our question. So thank you all, and Dr. Wilson and Dr. Jackson, great experiences that you shared with us. Great food for thought and ideas from what you shared. I guess our biggest question is, as you were talking, we were recognizing we were thinking through our specific situation here at Forsyth Tech and wondering what were some of, if you had to tell us the 3 biggest obstacles that you faced in the buy-in piece, because it felt to me like there's such you're creating such extreme changes in this transformational effort for how faculty are thinking about what their role is and in how they embrace their role. And that is true culture change, which can be frustrating at times. And, so I'm sure that you had some pushback. And I guess what we were wondering is, what did you do how did you get the naysayers on board, and what obstacles did you face? And then what strategies did you use to overcome those obstacles? That might be a compound question. Sorry.
It's an excellent question, Janet. And so I'll take an initial stab, Andrea, if that's okay. And then I'll toss it over to you. I think one of the first things in our approach was to leverage something already happening at the institution, so that it didn't feel as new as a whole different initiative that they weren't somehow already connected to. So I mentioned that we had a quality enhancement plan that we were finishing up that was connected to online instruction. At a much smaller level, they were doing kind of faculty mentorship around online instruction, where they had developed strategies with online instruction. A faculty coach would meet with another faculty member to help them with their shells. And faculty began to observe and notice that some of the same strategies they were using online would probably be impactful in a regular face-to-face class. So when I came on board at Wilkes, I noticed that there was already buy-in to this existing online faculty learning program. And I began to think, how can I leverage that success and take it to a much broader level, and also think through how I can empower those faculty champions who had already been working with faculty on online instruction to do it at a broader scale. Because to your excellent point, to just come in and just roll something like that out would have been a challenge. So identifying already existing successes that we can build upon became really important. The other piece I would share is we really wanted to engage and did engage our faculty senate early. This is what we're kind of thinking through that and hearing from them the challenges, right? So that we could, so it didn't seem like it was a shock, like it wasn't like a aha, later, and here's this big plan and, whatever. We wanted to socialize it with them a bit. So I started with my deans, and then some of those faculty champions I mentioned happened to also be department chairs. So we socialized it a bit with them, and then we socialized with faculty senate. So this is over months now. So I don't want you to think it was like 1 week we did this and next week we did that, and next week we did this socializing happened over time. But we were able to hear from folk about where the challenges were and the hiccups, and begin to think through with them how we might navigate that and kind of develop strategies and solutions around that. That also helped them feel like they were a part of this process, and it wasn't something that was being done to them. It was something that was being developed with them. So I think that's a really important distinction. It takes a lot more time, but I think your success on the back end is really important. And then I'm going to close out with this and toss it back to Andrea. And then at the end of our teaching and learning fellowship program, we didn't leave it at, we think we've done this great program, and so, here's the model, blah, blah. We asked them, we gave them a QR code and said, how's it going? We met with our PLC coaches, those faculty champions, every 2 weeks. What's happening? What do we need to shift? We said, this is a plane we're building as we're flying it. So this is not done when we launch it. This is a model that we're going to constantly be, it's not fixed, it's static. So we're going to constantly be shifting and moving and making changes, et cetera, as we go based on the needs and the feedback of our faculty. So they felt empowered to give input along the way and even at the end before we created year 2 of this fellowship program. Okay, go ahead, Andrea.
Thank you so much, Yolanda. So I'm going to give the short version because I think, again, I hear so many similarities and what you iterated, Yolanda, that the familiarity, there has to be some level of something that rings true or something that we're slightly comfortable with. If not, it feels like a punt from left field. We actually had about 2 years of having instructional coaches on our campus before something was pushed down anyone's throat. And I'm saying that as nicely as possible. And so in those 2 years, and I just happen to be one of the coaches that have been here from the beginning, there were relationships that started to be built. I'm sure you all are familiar with instructional coaches can, really have a bad vibe. People can feel like they're punitive. And you can be from A to Z. Either you're really here to help or you're really here to gotcha. So it's my life's work. So that's where I come from. That's where I emanate from as far as an educator. So I use all the skills that, the man above put in me, and I laid a foundation from our deans to our president, our vice president, and anyone that had ears, that I was here as a helpmate and a support, capacity. And so there was literally a foundation laid. Now, I'm not going to say that it was all encompassing and everybody was completely on board, but what I will say is that my reputation really helped, along with a faculty PD committee that was formed that, was also behind, some of the things that we were saying and how we were saying them. And our deans were on board. And so it came across having this initiative. It was not easy, but it was not as difficult as it could have been. People were feeling like if it's coming from the coaches or if it's coming now from the center, then it might be an okay thing. And literally it was word of mouth. Once we had a few folks to come in, we did some one-on-one and we allowed them to see that this might work, or let me show you a different way. They went back, they told a friend, and literally you're hearing it from the top down. You're hearing it in these one-on-one sessions. You're hearing it in everything that we're doing. And so it started to catch on. Again, we have daily, challenges, if I will. But other than that, I think that building a rapport, which is what we ask our instructors to do with their students every day. We do that with our colleagues. We ask our staff to do the same with every student that they come into contact with. So that is literally the basis of how we work.
Thank you both. So getting faculty involved. I love, Dr. Wilson, you're coining faculty champions. I might have to steal that. And just really creating the space for your faculty to be change agents and part of this process. So thank you both for that. One real quick question, if you would just take maybe 30 seconds or less to help address Sarah's question before we log off. In terms of how do you envision translating this culture that you've spoke to today into actual action and change in the classroom? So it's, here, and then how do we actually see that action taking place or impacting student learning?
So I mentioned that part of our teaching and learning fellowship program are the implementation of those communities of practice or professional learning communities. And so we're saying to faculty, you are kind of the owner and champion of your own classroom. Okay, this is your space. We're giving you the tools to feel safe to try new things. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. Pivot and try something else. Let's try new things, almost like your classroom is laboratory. Collect the data to see if it's been impactful or effective. And if it has, share that with us and scale it up. And if it hasn't, share that with us too, so that we know and we can think that through. And so I think our faculty are feeling empowered in a safe space to utilize some of the tools that we're giving them to do that great work in the classroom or online. And so what we have done then is ask them through their own Power BI dashboard and access to their own core success data now, because now they have access to that, is to monitor then their own data. And data is not always summative, you're right, at the end of a semester. It's ongoing. How they do on the test, right? Classroom assessment techniques, that whole wonderful book that Thomas Angelo and Kay Patricia Cross has produced. They're, minute papers, and there are all kinds of ways for you to collect data to see how students are doing and pivot in real time if things are not going well. So we show them how to look at data at a micro and a macro level. So they don't always think it has to be at the dashboard that they begin to make a change. You can begin to collect data in real time in your classroom and implement a strategy and make a shift right then. We encourage our faculty to also use an instrument we developed called an early course check-in. Real simple, do it in the first 25% of the term. And it's asked to students, what's going well, what's not going well, what would you like to see different, blah, blah, blah. Faculty is imbued in their Moodle shells. Students get that, feel empowered to give feedback in real time while it's still early enough to make a change. Faculty see that and are able to utilize that data from students to see how things are going well instructionally in the classroom. Andrea.
Right. Thank you, Yolanda. I agree, of course, with everything that you just mentioned, and I would just add briefly, I see giving our faculty accolades when they have those moments of breakthrough and the light comes on, let us know. We want to advertise that. We want to shine the light on you. And for some of our faculty, they feel like the attaboys are so huge. We monitor and adjust every day as teachers, as educators, and we want to encourage them to continue to do that, but to also let everyone know what it is that you're doing, because sometimes that's all it takes is an acknowledgement. And I think that empowers people sometimes more than we realize. So that's something that I think can definitely go a long ways. Thank you.
We would like to thank you both. You have been amazing. I've learned so much from you. I know that the folks watching this here live and on the recording will also lean and glean a lot of information, valuable information and strategies and really affirmation to the great work that they probably are already starting to do, but also some really key strategies for continuing to build this culture of teaching and learning. So thank you both. Thank you, thank you, thank you from the Belk Center. And on behalf of all our North Carolina community colleges, we thank you again. Just a quick reminder that we will have another webinar coming up on November 15th, so 2 weeks from today, from 9 to 10 a.m. And that webinar will focus on data-informed decision-making and actually using classroom analytics for making student-centered decisions. So drilling down a little bit more, we'll hear from some faculty about things that they're doing, how they're using data from their colleges, access to that to make decisions about the classroom. And so we're really excited about that upcoming event. So please register, have your folks register. We look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Again, thank you to Dr. Jackson, Dr. Wilson for your time today. And thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.